First off, I just want to thank a few folks, Carl for organizing this event, my editors and friends at Sports Illustrated who came, and my editors and friends at my publisher who have come. And I also want to thank my wife, because she's not here tonight because she's working at the hospital in Baltimore, which she's been doing for about 10 years now. But she put up with me traveling across the country to cover a team in Los Angeles when we lived in Baltimore, which is kind of crazy, actually. And I spent a lot of time doing that while I was working full-time at Sports Illustrated. And since she's not here tonight, I know there's a YouTube possibility over there, but can someone like take a picture while I'm doing this? Thank you. I appreciate it. Before I get to my reading, I just wanted to talk a little bit about something that, for me, is a fascinating thing that I will never figure out completely, but will always try and continue to figure out, which is the process of interviewing. It so happens that I usually interview athletes and coaches and people in the sports world, but I'm always interested in the techniques that you can use to try and get people to be extremely candid with you. There's a lot of different things, a lot of different ideas. Ask questions that you don't know the answer to. Be relaxed, all that sort of stuff. Prepare. And there's one thing, though, that in this book I think I felt pretty good about, which was that I was able to get people to be unflinchingly, often brutally honest about their thoughts. Positive and negative, and how the arrival of David Beckham to this humble soccer team in America changed their lives. And that included people like Landon Donovan, who was Beckham's teammate and is the best player, I would argue, that America has ever produced, who, to my mind, showed some pretty big stones, saying some things about Beckham that I think were fair and accurate, and that no other Beckham teammate had ever really said about him or dared to do. And that included, we saw the excerpt in Sports Illustrated, Donovan calling Beckham a bad teammate, an even worse captain. He told me that David Beckham wasn't committed to the team. This was at the end of the 2008 season after 2 years of playing with the guy. And these are pretty serious allegations to make in the sporting world. And yet, the response that he got from a lot of people was, well, why did Donovan say this stuff? Why would he do this? In fact, there's the soccer version of talk radio in America is a website called BigSoccer.com. If you're a soccer fan, I'm sure you've already seen. But there's a columnist for them that wrote, the obvious question was, why did Donovan do this? We're left with a very short list of possibilities. One, Wahl and Donovan were on the 9th day of a 2-week-long alcohol bender and had that conversation while taking turns snorting horse off the stomach of a hooker. 2, Wahl slipped him a roofie, then made it all up, and Donovan doesn't want to admit that he can't remember anything for fear that Grant has some extremely embarrassing photos involving farm animals. Or 3, Donovan wanted the world and David Beckham to know exactly what he thought. And this brings you back to my fascination with the process of interviewing. And sometimes I've been able to achieve that with the magazine. I got Rashad McCants, a former player at North Carolina, to sit for 3 hours one time and not just tell me his life story, but by the end of it, hand me his poetry and stuff. And it's a cool feeling when you can reach that connection with somebody. And one other thing that I realized, because this is my first book, is that the process of writing a book is different than a magazine piece. And I love magazine writing, but what you're doing in a lot of cases is kind of parachuting in for 2 or 3 days, and you get good access, but you're often coming in when things are going well. And this was a different process. I was around this team for 16 months, and a lot of our conversations, our interviews, whether it was Landon Donovan or Alexi Lalas, who was the president and general manager of the team, began with them asking me these this for the book or for the magazine? And I was working at Sports Illustrated at the time. Now, I was also using my advance money from Crown to be doing reporting on these interviews. It was interesting because if it was for the book, they were willing to be extremely candid in ways that surprised me. For example, Landon Donovan gave up the captain's armband to David Beckham soon after Beckham arrived in 2007. And the story that was told to all the media at the time was this was Donovan doing this on his own. When Donovan asked me, is this for the book or for the magazine? Well, okay, it's for the book. Yeah, they came to me and told me I had to give it up. And it was interesting because there's this whole layer of stuff that was going on that wasn't out there in the public realm. And that continued to happen over and over again, maybe in part because everyone's so tight-lipped about a team with David Beckham on it. And yet at the same time, this was this small soccer team. This wasn't really the NFL or the NBA, and you get access to these guys in this soccer league that is amazing. It's like what I imagine was like with the NFL in the 1960s, sitting by the pool talking to Joe Namath before the Super Bowl. And it's really fun. Alexi Lalas was the same way. Is this for the book or the magazine? And once he got fired in particular, he told me all sorts of things that hadn't been in the public realm about what was really going on behind the scenes. So for me, that was an interesting process. And I do feel like from an ethical perspective that I still did my magazine right. Interviewed Beckham for the magazine in 2007 before I knew I was doing the book, and put my best stuff in that story. And the magazine also was able to run the first excerpt of this book, which was good for the magazine and good for the book. But I'll be honest with you, I mean, like it was a tough process, that whole thing, deciding this is for the book, the magazine, all that stuff. So if you have any questions about that afterward, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I don't know all the right answers about this, but I tried to negotiate as best as I could. The part I'm going to be reading about, though, is about this kind of common theme in my book, which is about worlds colliding. When David Beckham came to the United States to play in MLS, he was making about $50 million a year, including endorsements, and joined a team with teammates who played who made less than $20,000 a year, as little as $12,900. And that's because of this crazy salary cap at MLS. And it created all sorts of odd situations inside the team, inside the locker room, when the team went out for dinner together. And so I'm going to read a little part about what it's like for an MLS team to travel on the road, which is something that David Beckham wasn't quite used to. The Sheraton Hotel in Braintree, Massachusetts, south of Boston, may just be the worst Sheraton in America. Located hard by an Interstate 93 exit ramp, bathed in car exhaust fumes, the hotel shares a parking lot with the TGI Fridays chain restaurant across the street from the charmless Seen Better Days shopping mall. For some reason, never explained, the Sheraton Braintree is designed to look like a castle, with turrets, flags, and a notch-top facade. Inside, the small, poorly lit lobby is paneled in the cheap-looking wood that you might have seen on the side of a 1970 station wagon. It is the kind of hotel that serves cubicle dwellers from Syracuse in dandruff speckled sports coats on a 5-day, 5-city New England business trip. The classy Ritz-Carlton and Four Seasons overlooking Boston Common are 10 miles to the north, but they might as well be a universe away. The Sheraton Braintree also happened to be the league-mandated hotel for visiting MLS teams in town to play the New England Revolution. When the Los Angeles Galaxy arrived to check in on August 10th, David Beckham and Abel Xavier, European pros used to the finest of accommodations, did an exaggerated double take, looking first at each other, then, quote, looking at us like it was an episode of Punk'd with Ashton